ভ্রমণ রঙ্গে। গৌর আমার যেসব স্থানে করিল ভ্রমণ রঙ্গে, সেসব স্থান হেরিব আমি প্রণয়ী ভকত সঙ্গে। সেসব স্থান হেরিব আমি প্রণয়ী ভকত সঙ্গে। গৌর আমার যেসব স্থানে করিল ভ্রমণ রঙ্গে, সেসব স্থান হেরিব আমি প্রণয়ী ভকত সঙ্গে। মৃদঙ্গ বাদ্য শুনিতে মন অবসর সদা যাচ্ছে। মৃদঙ্গ বাদ্য শুনিতে মন অবসর সদা যাচ্ছে। গৌরবিহিত কীর্তন শুনি আনন্দের হৃদয় নাচে। গৌরবিহিত কীর্তন শুনি আনন্দের হৃদয় নাচে। শুদ্ধ ভকত চরণ রেণু ভজনয় অনুকূল। যুগল মূর্তি দেখিয়া মোর পরম আনন্দ হয়। প্রসাদ সেবা করিতে হয় সকল প্রপঞ্চ যেদিন গৃহে ভজন দেখি গৃহেতে গোলক ভাই। যেদিন গৃহে ভজন দেখি গৃহেতে গোলক ভাই। চরণ সিধু দেখিয়া গঙ্গা সুখ না সীমা পায়। চরণ সিধু দেখিয়া গঙ্গা সুখ না সীমা পায়। তুলসী দেখি জুড়ায় প্রাণ মাধব তো শনি জানে। তুলসী দেখি জুড়ায় প্রাণ মাধব তো শনি জানে। গৌর প্রিয় শাক সেবনে জীবন সার্থক মানি। গৌর প্রিয় শাক সেবনে জীবন সার্থক মানি। ভকতি বিনোদ কৃষ্ণ ভজনে অনুকূল পায় যাহা। ভকতি বিনোদ কৃষ্ণ ভজনে অনুকূল পায় যাহা।
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Mukunda Datta Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam Prabhuji.
Dandavat Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So Hare Krishna. So we are very fortunate to welcome His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu. Prabhu is at Vrindavan now, and Prabhuji, I will just give a brief introduction about Mukunda Datta Prabhuji. He is an initiated disciple of His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji joined 45 years ago, and he was very much impressed by the comprehensive, authentic, and nectarian presentation of the science of Krishna Bhakti, as clearly explained in many books of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji has recorded many Vaishnava songs in Gaudiya singing style, and currently he serves as the Sanskrit or English translator and editor for BBT, serves as a member of Shastric Advisory Council to ISKCON governing body, GBC, and Prabhuji travels all over the world lecturing for many years on Vedic literature such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So we welcome Prabhuji by loudly chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Dandavat to all of you. How many are we in this conference?
Around 50 devotees are there. Prabhuji, this class is being live on YouTube and Facebook both, and as well as Hindi translation is also going on.
Okay. All right. So then let's begin with, I will recite Mangalacharana just to invoke auspiciousness. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yutaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savathutam Parijanasahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimade Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarane. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. I was asked to begin with a brief introduction, but you've already done that, so we don't need to talk anymore. I'm late and the time is short. So one of the topics I was asked to cover is how I came to Krishna consciousness. And I actually grew up in Los Angeles, just near the Los Angeles Temple.
Hare Krishna, excuse me, Prabhuji, your video is not visible.
That's because it doesn't work.
Okay.
Sorry. So I grew up near the Los Angeles Temple, and as I don't recall a time when I didn't really know about the devotees. Anyway, so when I was young, I was religious, and I was also interested in all things Indian. And so I was naturally drawn to the devotees, and I knew about them. But when I got older, I started to read Srila Prabhupada's books, and I was convinced by Srila Prabhupada about Krishna consciousness. And I had already decided that I wanted to be some sort of religious, I wanted to be a priest, actually. But Srila Prabhupada really swept me off my feet, so to speak. And so I joined ISKCON when I was pretty young, about 15. At that time, I was going to school just north of Los Angeles. I went to a private school. And I was practicing Krishna consciousness at that time on my own, reading Prabhupada's books and chanting rounds and following the principles. I had become a vegetarian already, and I had already practiced yoga for some time. And so I started to visit the Los Angeles Temple, and I appreciated immediately that my understanding of Krishna consciousness was different than that I was hearing from the devotees. So I came to understand the value of associating with devotees. I had been contaminated by Mayavad ideas and didn't even realize it. That's pretty normal in the modern day and age. Anyway, so once a god brother of mine, Shubhananda Prabhu, he called me up when I was at school. Somehow or other, he found my number and reached out to me. He told me that Srila Prabhupada was coming to Los Angeles very soon, and that I should take advantage of the opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada and to hear from Srila Prabhupada. As we hear from Lord Shiva in his Rudra Gita, he says, Kshinardhenapi tulayena swargam napunar bhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya martyanam kim udhashishaha. If one by chance associates with a devotee, even for a fraction of a moment, He no longer is subject to the attraction by the results of karma or gyan. What interest then can he have in the benedictions of demigods who are subject to the laws of birth and death? So he impressed upon me that it was a very rare opportunity to get Srila Prabhupada's association. He said, Srila Prabhupada is getting older. We don't know how long he'll be with us. And so he strongly encouraged me to take all pains to come to Los Angeles and see Srila Prabhupada. This was in sometime in June of 1976. And as it turned out, this was, in fact, the last time that Srila Prabhupada came to Los Angeles. So if I had not listened to his advice, I would not have seen Srila Prabhupada. For that, I'm eternally thankful. The picture on the screen is that of the head pujari in Vrindavan, Mukunda Dutta, not me, just for your information. Sorry, my video doesn't work. So anyway, then I came. I took some great trouble actually to get out of school. It was Krishna's arrangement to help me leave school before the school year ended and come to see Srila Prabhupada, but I did that. And during the course of about a week that Srila Prabhupada was there, I came at least 3-4 times in the morning, and mainly I saw him giving the class and just Guru Puja and class like that. In those days, Srila Prabhupada was the only spiritual master in ISKCON. And so that meant that every single member of ISKCON wanted to get Prabhupada's association, and everyone wanted to get close to him. And at that time, I was an outsider and just very young also, so I wasn't privileged to get so close. But I did hear him give the class. I remember the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada, he was to greet the deity in the early morning. And I was standing on the balcony of the Los Angeles temple. Within the temple, there's you can say a mezzanine from which one can also take darshan of the deities. So it looked over the temple room. I had, so to speak, a bird's eye view of the temple. And I saw Srila Prabhupada came in just before greeting the deity. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada walked into the room from his quarters, then it was like the sun god walked in. He was really just effulgent like that. And in those days, he used to wear this very shiny silk. And somehow he just was absolutely effulgent. And I was stunned actually to see such a personality. Never in the world had I ever seen anyone quite like him. And he moved very slowly, very thoughtfully. He just came across the temple room and he took darshan of each deity. He offered his pranams. He took charanamritam, and then he sat down on the vyasasana. Then there was Guru Puja. And after the Guru Puja, he began to chant Jai Radha Madhava. Now, I just could not take my eyes off of him at this time. And even though by then I actually knew the words.
There's no Prabhupada who put this photo and he said that it's not me.
Yeah, this is Vrindavan mein do Mukunda Datta hain. Ek main hu aur ek head pujari hain. So this is pujari, not me, sorry. So anyway, so I saw Srila Prabhupada, he sat down to give the class, and even though I knew the words to the song, I was still just so absolutely fascinated by just looking at Srila Prabhupada. I couldn't even remember the words to the song. So I could hardly follow. But anyway, after that, then he spoke, and it was very difficult for me to hear Srila Prabhupada in the beginning. Not only because all of this was fairly new to me, all the Sanskrit, but also because he had a very thick Bengali accent that I found it even harder to understand. And frankly, I didn't get a whole lot out of the classes intellectually because it was just very hard for me to hear. But I know that at that time, Srila Prabhupada was speaking from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Ajami Lobakyan. And so I think he was talking about these 13 witnesses to everything that we do. So anyway, that was really the closest that I got to Srila Prabhupada. Other than that, once I was sitting on the front lawn of the Los Angeles temple, and I was sitting with a devotee who had invited me to see Srila Prabhupada. His name was Shubhananda. And Shubhananda had a straight view of Srila Prabhupada's the doors to Srila Prabhupada's quarters, outside doors. So at that time, he saw that Srila Prabhupada was coming out of his quarters. And he told me, we both bowed down and were looking at Srila Prabhupada with folded hands. Then a car pulled up in the alley and they were going to take Srila Prabhupada somewhere. This is maybe 10 or 11 a.m. So he told me that, you know, it's too bad we don't have any flowers. We could offer some flowers to Srila Prabhupada. As soon as Srila Prabhupada said, as soon as this devotee said that, I looked and saw that there were some flowers growing in the flower bed in front of the temple, decorative flowers. So being only 15 years old, I went immediately and picked these flowers and went straight up to Srila Prabhupada's car and offered, the window was open because it was summertime. And I just held the flowers in front of Srila Prabhupada for him. And Srila Prabhupada asked his servant, what is this? And his servant said, he's offering you some flowers, Srila Prabhupada. And so Srila Prabhupada very graciously accepted those flowers, and then they drove away. That was the closest interaction, the only personal interaction that I ever had with Srila Prabhupada. In fact, I really couldn't get close to Srila Prabhupada, as I said, because I was young and because it was very coveted. But that memory is eternally with me. And I somehow had that good fortune to at least see it, pure devotee. And as we just heard from Lord Shiva, even just a fraction of a second with such a devotee, yeah, this is the right picture, then one can get all benedictions. So I was very happy at that. And as I said, for a few days within that week, I saw Srila Prabhupada like this. I tried to hear from the class, etc. But I never really had any other association or personal anecdotes to share about that. I was mostly trained up by Srila Prabhupada's close disciples, like especially Tamal Krishna Goswami, because after this experience, I had gone to Ratha Yatra in San Francisco as well. And then I just decided that I wanted to surrender to Krishna. I wanted to join the temple. Of course, I was too young to do that, so they didn't let me do that. But somehow or other, I made it into the temple. I had to go to another temple and join there. And then eventually I ended up on Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party. And so I was trained up mainly for my whole early career in Krishna consciousness from Tamal Krishna Maharaj. But everything that he did was coming from Prabhupada, so it wasn't really much difference. So I felt very fortunate like that. Of course, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was with Srila Prabhupada in the very end days in 1977. This is after I had joined. I was already distributing books on Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party at this time. And that's, as far as I know, that's where Bhakti Charu Swami came into the picture, because he was also there in Vrindavan. I think, in fact, Srila Prabhupada called him to be there. Prabhupada liked him. Srila Prabhupada liked Bhakti Charu Swami because Bhakti Charu Swami was exactly the kind of person that Srila Prabhupada was trying to get to join ISKCON. In 1976 and 1977, ISKCON was dominated by Western devotees, Western-born devotees. We didn't really know very much. We didn't have very good samskars, and we were very rough around the edges, so to speak. And so when Bhakti Charu Swami came, and on top of that, he gets extra credit because he was from Bengal. So Srila Prabhupada just really liked him. And he, of course, had these wonderful Vaishnava qualities just as part of his eternal character. So he was very, very special person from the very beginning. Srila Prabhupada gave him all of his initiations pretty much at the same time. And the rest you all know very well, what inspired you all to take shelter of his lotus feet. I never really had that much personal association with Bhakti Charu Swami, but I have always had a great respect for him and admiration for all the wonderful things that he embodies about Krishna consciousness. And just a few incidences I can say. when he first came out with his book, Ocean of Mercy. This is very recent. I really wanted that book, of course. And so I got my personal copy from him. He autographed it for me. Sometime later on, when I was traveling and preaching, normally at this time of the year, I'm always in America traveling and preaching. So our paths crossed in Chicago. And I was very lucky to have prasadam with him there. He had given a wonderful lecture about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And during prasadam, we were talking about that and other topics about Krishna consciousness. But I never really had such close association with him. I've always been his admirer from a little bit of a distance. What else was I supposed to talk about? I don't remember. I was supposed to give how I came to Krishna consciousness, my association with Srila Prabhupada, my association with Bhakti Charu Swami. I can say that I know to some degree what kind of grief all of you are feeling right now, because I've been through it twice. First, when Srila Prabhupada left in 1977, and second, when Tamal Krishna Goswami left, just maybe 20-something years ago. Both of those events were very, how can I say? You all know, you understand. But what I can say about this is that Srila Prabhupada always used to emphasize the importance of Vani over Vapu. Tamal Krishna Goswami told me that although we say that the Vani, or the instructions of the spiritual master, are more important than the Vapu, or the physical association of the spiritual master, he said, still, I never lost a single opportunity. If I could get Srila Prabhupada's personal association, I took it. He told me that. And it's bittersweet in the sense that the closer, the more association, personal association you have with your spiritual master, the more painful it is when that vapu is removed. But the fact of the matter is, Jata sihi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha ityadi. We have to all leave this world at some point. Before he left this world, Srila Prabhupada told us, this body can go at any time. He told us. And we know this is common sense. Still, I think the entire movement, somehow or other, was put into some sort of maya that I don't understand. Actually, the fact is that none of us really believed that Srila Prabhupada would leave us. We just didn't believe it, because we saw that in every respect, Srila Prabhupada was breaking all the physical laws of material nature. Obviously he was not conditioned by those things. And so we just assumed that he cannot go now. He's got to finish this Srimad Bhagavatam. He said that the remaining 50% of his mission is still there. He had plans to come to the West and show us personally how to live simply, think highly in Varnashram culture. And we were still, even as Srila Prabhupada was so sick and lying on his deathbed, if you will, we didn't really believe it until it happened. And then it was really quite a grievous shock. Especially I know that in this current circumstances, this has happened so fast that it's really hard to process. I know that after Tamal Krishna Maharaj left as well, I myself was very calm for several days until I got into the association of so many devotees, because in those days I was in graduate school and I was living away from the temple. But when I went to Texas shortly afterwards for a service that they held there in his honor, then it really hit me. And I took darshan of the deities there, Shri Radha Nila Madhava. And those, I think, are the biggest deities in ISKCON, if I'm not mistaken. Mayapur is a close second, but knowing Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they should be the biggest in ISKCON. Anyway, I looked at Srimati Radharani's face and I saw Tamal Krishna Goswami's face instead. And I just broke down. At that point, I couldn't hold it anymore. It's natural. And in fact, in some sense, it's cathartic, it's healthy. So if you feel that need, indulge that need. In another sense, I can say that the separation gets stronger every year. It's been, so many decades now since my Gurujanas left this world. And still I feel their absence. Now, having said that is my personal experience. But I would like to point out about this that just as Srila Prabhupada constantly warned us that he would leave at any time, he never, ever, I never once even have found any statement from Srila Prabhupada in which he expressed that he was feeling separation from his spiritual master. Not even one instance can I find in which Srila Prabhupada expresses that. And I think that it's because, as our Acharya, he has to teach us by his example how to process the physical loss of our spiritual master. Of course, Srila Prabhupada went through the same thing. Not only that, he lost his spiritual master, but the whole institution broke up after the departure of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Still, Srila Prabhupada never told us anything along the lines that, I cannot bear the separation from my Guru. Rather, on the other hand, he always used to emphasize that I feel his presence at every moment. Why? Because when we were following the instructions of the spiritual master, that is when we were the closest to the spiritual master. And we have seen, practically speaking also, that there are personal servants of the spiritual master. And although they're in the same room with him, they're not really with him as much as those who are really in their hearts, struggling hard to sustain his mission or to expand his mission or to serve his instructions or to follow his example or to preach as he would preach and do as he would do in this world. That is really how we get the eternal association of the spiritual master, when we embody his Vani and our own character. And the physical loss of our spiritual master, the disappearance of the Tirobhava of his Prakata Vapu, that actually forces on us that we have to rise to this responsibility. Everyone has to go through this. As I said, Jata Sihi Dhruvo Mrityu. Srila Prabhupada had to somehow deal with the loss of his spiritual master. And Tamal Krishna Goswami also told me that after Srila Prabhupada left, you cannot imagine, or you can only imagine maybe, someone who was so close to Srila Prabhupada that you can hardly find a picture of a photograph of Srila Prabhupada that doesn't have Tamal Krishna Maharaj standing nearby. Someone who had so much close training and physical personal association, how much it must have affected him. But what I saw in 1977 and 1978 was that Tamal Krishna Maharaj turned his entire attention, and any of his concentration was always intense, and it was always productive as well. He was very focused, and he was actually not easy to associate with because he was so intently devoted. But whenever he would put his attention to something, it would immediately manifest as a fact. It's something like that Satya Kama, Satya Sankalpa opulence that Lord Vishnu has. So what I saw is that he put his entire attention on the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in the mood of being their servant. And in that way, he said he told me this, that he felt the separation would be mitigated. That was something that I learned from him. As much as he appreciated the Vapu, he also had to take shelter of the Vani. We all have to do this. It is a more mature relationship with the spiritual master to follow his instructions, to execute his mission, to sustain his dreams and ambitions in his absence, than it is even to have his physical association in which we get so much nectar. So that is something that we're forced to do. When the spiritual master leaves, it is Krishna's arrangement for bringing us all up in that way and maturing, I should say, our relationship with our spiritual master and bringing us to this level that Srila Prabhupada constantly manifested, in which he never felt the absence. He never felt the absence of his spiritual master. So Bhakti Charu Swami, he was also with Tamal Krishna Maharaj when Prabhupada left. Would be hard to express how much grief he must have been feeling at that time. And then through the laws of nature, and especially through Krishna's own desire, now he has been taken on as well. He's gone on to the next stage, whatever the next service that Srila Prabhupada has for him. I'm sure Srila Prabhupada must have had some purpose in recalling him. So that has to be the case. We cannot always be with each other. Everyone in this material world will be separated, just like the sticks in the river. They're flowing for some time, and then after some time they will separate. But what we can get out of this relationship and the association while we have it is something that can benefit us eternally. So these are just a few thoughts that I can share about Bhakti Charu Swami and how we can deal with our Krishna consciousness, even in his absence. I don't know what time it is or how much time I've gone, but maybe I should stop here. And if anybody has any questions, we can discuss it further.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, there are few questions, and if you want to, we can take now or later also. We can go up to 8:30.
Yes, so the time now is 8:05. Let's take some questions if anybody has any.
Okay, so Sundar Damodar Prabhu, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandvat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances. Prabhuji, we feel very inspired to hear how from the very tender age of 15 you were so fixed without any doubt. Prabhuji, please enlighten and bless how we can get this very strong faith in Krishna consciousness.
Well, I mean, I've always been staunchly theistic. There's no doubt about that. How strong my faith is, and it can be measured by how much I've actually surrendered. And you all will have to judge that. I know for myself that I still have so much work to do. But somehow or other, by some maybe past association with devotees, I've never had any lack of faith in God or in his devotees. Somehow or other, that was my good fortune, but it really didn't mean much beyond sentiment, as I said earlier, until I read Srila Prabhupada's books. I was in touch with Krishna consciousness from a very young age. We, being so close to the temple, we used to receive books and magazines, and we used to like the pictures, colorful, exotic pictures. But we couldn't really understand as kids only. But as I got older, then I started to read, and I thought, my God, this is every question is answered. And in a delectable way and in an authoritative way, Srila Prabhupada's books are nothing if not authoritative. So really the credit is his. And somehow or other, he must have known that I was out there waiting. And so he undertook so many austerities to fulfill the order of his spiritual master, just to pull out so many of us. So I'm just a very fortunate recipient of that mercy somehow by God's grace. All of you should understand too, that this responsibility is yours now. In the absence of the spiritual master, the training stage is now you have to put into practice, and you have to know that there are so many projects that he had. He came here he came to America risking his life only to fulfill some of these projects, like the remaining 50% of Srila Prabhupada's mission. So that work is there, and all of you have to recognize that you have a part to play, and you should also recognize that there are so many others just waiting for Krishna consciousness. They are out there because it is Krishna's zimmedari that he puts these people where they need to be. Karmana daivanetrena ityadi. Krishna knows who to put where, but we have to do our part by extending Krishna consciousness to them on behalf of our spiritual master, whether he's here or whether he's not here, the mission is the same.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, there is another question by Kishori Priyam Mataji. Thank you, Prabhuji, for sharing the memories of your association with Srila Prabhupada and Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj. In the absence of direct instruction from Gurudev, who is not physically present, how do we understand what he wants us to do? How do we derive that from listening to his Vani?
You know, Krishna consciousness, our relationship with our spiritual master, it has two aspects. There are the general instructions, and then there are the specific instructions. I've already shared with you, I never really had the opportunity to get all the specific instructions. In that sense, I'm the opposite of Bhakti Charu Swami or Tamal Krishna Maharaj or so many others who did have that opportunity. But at the same time, it's maybe good, because my entire inspiration and my direction and my happiness in Krishna consciousness has from the very beginning always been based mainly in Srila Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada so many times used to reiterate that everything is in those books. Do not doubt that for a moment. Everything is there. We just have to discipline ourselves and very carefully read those books. This has always been ISKCON disease. Even Srila Prabhupada used to complain about this. Even when he was here, he used to say that you think that these books are only for distributing instead of reading. But we need to read the books. When we do that, then we get the association of Srila Prabhupada. I don't have any doubt, knowing Bhakti Charu Swami and his nature vis-a-vis Srila Prabhupada, I don't have any doubt that he would direct all of you to take shelter of Srila Prabhupada's books, because whatever he's teaching is coming from those books, and everything is in those books, and everything is sufficient for us to become Krishna conscious and to spread Krishna consciousness. Everything is, books are the basis, as Srila Prabhupada used to say.
Thank you, Prabhuji. There is another question. Prabhuji, how sincerely we in ISKCON desire the establishment of Varnashram? How do you feel the Varnashram would be established?
I didn't get the first part of the question, sorry.
How sincerely we in ISKCON desire the establishment of Varnashram?
how sincerely do we desire to establish Varnashram? Is that the question?
How sincerely we in ISKCON desire the
Yes.
establishment of Varnashram?
Yeah. It's still not clear. Are you asking if we are sincere about this or not?
No, it means maybe he is asking what are the different things we are doing to establish Varnashram.
Okay, well, this is a huge, huge topic. I don't know where to begin. It's so big. It's an ocean. Let's begin with rural agrarian communities and farm projects. There is no doubt that Srila Prabhupada's emphasis with regard to Varnashram Dharma was the establishment of self-sustaining, simple living, high-thinking farm communities. One can ask why that was Srila Prabhupada's emphasis, and there are any number of answers. Whether it's because he saw that the modern population is by and large enamored with hyper-capitalist ideals, such that the only way to get through to people is to emphasize that you need to eat, and that is the basis for all economies, or whether Srila Prabhupada, I mean, I don't know. I have to admit, I really don't know why Srila Prabhupada placed a lot of emphasis on this. But if we read Srila Prabhupada's books, we will also find that, but there's another dimension to Varnashram that is in Srila Prabhupada's books, and that is the social dimension. That Varnashram is an eternal social infrastructure that facilitates the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. In the Vishnu Purana, sixth book, actually, Maharaj Sagar, who was in the family of Ramchandra, he went to his guru Ardafa Muni and said, I'm the king. I'm responsible for all these people. I have to dharma samsthapana. I have to establish dharma, and I have to make sure that these people are all happy in Krishna consciousness. How am I going to do that? This is a concern that is not outside of our own mission. So Ardafa Muni replied, long answer over many chapters, Vishnu Purana. But the gist of it can be summed up in one shloka that Srila Prabhupada quotes ubiquitously throughout his books. Varnashrama charavata purushena parapuman ityadi, in which Ardafa Muni says that Varnashram Dharma is the only access point, the only portal, we can say, to pure Krishna consciousness for the people in general. Nanyat tattosha karanam. Practically speaking, he makes the very bold statement that there is no other way to become Krishna consciousness, in Krishna consciousness. So we really have to study Srila Prabhupada's books very hard to get a sense of what this social system is, because in fact, the eternal social system of what Prabhupada called Sanatana Dharma, also called Varnashram Dharma, it in fact is representative of the great cosmic order. That's called Rita in the old Vedic language. There is an order, there is a structure to the universe. Everything has its place, everything is going on, and it's assigned according to its assigned swadharma. And we also have our own swadharmas to fulfill. It's a social obligation externally, but internally also it helps us to make spiritual advancement. We have to appreciate Varnashram in this much deeper level. It's more than just simple farm communities and growing your own foods to evade the rampant capitalist culture that is now terrorizing the world. So that's a big topic. That's why I said it's a big topic. But it is for most people a necessary substrate or foundation for the development of healthy, sustainable Krishna consciousness. And therefore, Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text number 28. Yesham tu antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mantrahavarta. That means if you want to sustain a mature commitment to pure devotional service, then your actions have to be fixed in piety. And it has to come to the stage that piety relieves you of so much residue of previous sinful activities. We have to become purified in our consciousness. Varnashram does this. I believe that this is why Srila Prabhupada increasingly emphasized Varnashram in his later years. From about 1974 on, Srila Prabhupada gave 80% of his instructions on the topic of Varnashram Dharma. And he made it very clear that those instructions were squarely aimed at the initiated disciples in ISKCON, not outside people. And he increasingly reiterated this instructions very urgently towards the end, so much so that he risked his life in exactly the same way that Bhakti Charu Swami did, to come to America and show people how to do it. So it was very, very important for Srila Prabhupada that we assimilate the basic concept. Now, many of my older godbrothers, whom I respect, that like Gopi Paranatana Prabhu and so many others, they have observed in various interviews and essays that most of ISKCON's efforts in the realm of Varnashram Dharma have either failed or not been that substantial. And they have further observed that the reason for this in most cases is that we don't really have a concept. This is especially true, I would say, in the Western world, but in the modern world in general, including big cities like Pune and Ujjain and certainly Delhi, Mumbai, etc. The more urban you are in general, the less religious and the less, auspicious your life becomes. It is an ugra karmic civilization that we live in. And to be socialized in that kind of milieu, and then to try to take the metaphysical principles, I will say, of Varnashram system and apply them such that we can become Krishna conscious through that, it's not a very easy thing. So ISKCON has not had a good track record. And on top of that, there's a lot of, especially from the Western membership of ISKCON, there's a lot of bias, a lot of prejudice, frankly, and even antipathy, opposition to traditional Varnashram Dharma. That is a problem. And only the Indians, I would say, can help to resolve that problem. Why do I say this? There is no word in the English language that adequately subsumes the arena of concepts that are so nicely stated by the one Sanskrit word dharma. In other words, we don't have a word for dharma in English. Why might we not have a word for dharma in English? Because the concept of dharma is not there among the English-speaking peoples. You need a word when you have a concept that requires expression. If you don't have that concept and therefore don't need to express it, there's no need for such a word, is there? This is the problem. Now, Indians, it's not like that. Indians may know everything wrong about dharma. That is another fact. As Prabhupada also often said, but at least they have any concept of dharma. It's like this. When we were first introducing Srila Prabhupada's books in Chinese, it was a problem because the Chinese language doesn't actually have a word for God. How do you preach Krishna consciousness to people who don't even have a word for God? It means how can they understand anything about Krishna consciousness if they don't even have a clue as to what is God? This is the problem vis-a-vis dharma, especially in the Western, or as I said, modern civilization. So India has always had this tradition, and we can draw upon that, I think, better than anyone else in the world here in India. Now, why is this relevant? In the end, in 1977 in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada, he gave two main instructions. I think there's not really much argument about this. His final instructions. One was that you cooperate and sustain whatever, well, these are two things, they go together. He said you cooperatively sustain this institution as it is. Do not let it decay. In the beginning, I mean, back in 77, we thought, well, sure, we can do that. That's not a problem at all. Well, why not expand? And for some time, things were expanding, but then we saw through hard experience, it's not really easy to simply sustain. Now, the word dharma comes from which verbal dhatu? Does anyone know? Tri dhatu. And tri means sustain, to sustain something. Dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. If you understand dharma, if you apply dharma, that dharma will sustain you and your society. So, along with giving Srila Prabhupada, along with Srila Prabhupada giving this instruction that the ISKCON members should cooperate and sustain ISKCON, he gave us the means by which we might do that. And that means is Varnashram culture. Culture means Sanskriti. Paramparagata Bharatiya Sanskriti means to be working towards spiritual advancement even in your material life. The way that you eat, the way that you sleep, the way that you mate, and the way that you defend have to be, of course, Shastra ke anusar. So, ye Shastra vidimutsrajya vartate kama karata nasasiddhim avatnoti nasukham na param gatim. This, I believe, is why Srila Prabhupada gave this instruction. And I can't say I know, but I would guess that this is one reason that Srila Bhakti Charu Swami felt very strongly that there was a need to establish this community that he's working on in Florida and the United States, and of course elsewhere it should go on as well. That's a long answer to your question. Maybe I should stop here. Don't want to take up all the time on one topic.
There is one follow-up question for the same. Outside world is changing materially than before. It is hard to balance Varnashram Dharma even though we like to follow the same.
Yes, this is a very important point. And therefore, the conclusion that I have come to is that you should not try to fit Varnashram or Krishna consciousness, for that matter, into the modern world. It does not fit. Why? Because the modern world is antithetical. It is fundamentally opposed, and it's going to get worse, I'm sorry to say. Even if you don't ban TikTok, still they're going to, they have their fingers everywhere, atheists, and they're trying to destroy religion at every step. The United States State Department recently issued a statement, interesting statement, that there has never been religious persecution on the face of the earth such as that we see now within the last several years. This is a problem. If you don't go on the best defense is a good offense, as they say in English. If you don't vigorously preach Krishna consciousness according to the ideals and the example that were given to us by Srila Prabhupada and those who are transparently following him, then you're going to be swallowed up by the tidal wave of 21st century Kali Yuga decadence. So we have to give an alternative. This is what Srila Prabhupada really emphasized. Somehow or other, we as a society, I would dare to say, we have lost vision of the very clear connection that Srila Prabhupada made between a vigorous urban preaching effort and a rural, sustainable spiritual community that support that effort. This connection, this nexus, if you will, has to be very clearly established. And I'm sure that Bhakti Charu Swami had this in mind.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. There is one question. feels like that we shall do something focused in the service of Guru Maharaj. However, present engagements are still not allowing us to think beyond occupational duty that we have.
Occupational duty.
Occupational duty that we have. What will it take to surrender my life in the service of Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj? How can I surrender myself in this?
India supposedly received independence from the Western, at that time, superpowers in 1947 or thereabouts. In fact, what I see is that Indians are still by and large enslaved by the descendants of the same people who enslaved them 1 or 2 generations ago. And this is directly related to your question, because if we're all working, shall I say, onshore, India is the only country, I think, in the world where you're considered to be onshore when you're in someone else's country. When you're in your own country, the Indian conception is that you're offshore. Those of you in the IT industry will understand what I'm talking about. So we're enslaved by transnational corporations who are, in fact, the new superpowers. And they're not looking out for the establishment of dharma or even the sustenance of dharma, what to speak of your culture or your children. They don't care about that. They want to use you, and that is slavery. So this, if someone considers that this kind of 21st century slavery is an occupational duty, then I think that has a lot to do with the readjustment of our conception that we discussed earlier. We have to really study Srila Prabhupada's books and understand what he means when he talks about one's occupational duties. Because in many cases, what we conceive of as our occupational duty is actually a colossal hoax or a waste of time, and a destructive one at that. Now, having said that, it's understood that it's not so easy to extricate ourselves immediately. And the very last thing that I would propose is that we all quit our jobs and move out to some farm, because as I said, the conception has to be formulated first. Sambandha gyan ke bina, you cannot have any question of abhideya or prayojana. So, that's the first thing. I think we need to be seriously discussing the orders of our spiritual master. What exactly did Bhakti Charu Swami have in mind? And how would he carry out his mission? You all know this better than I do. But this is the idea. The very first thing is that we have to begin to seriously study these things, seriously discuss these things, and then we can formulate a plan, strategic plan, if you will. How are we going to actually implement the designs of our predecessor acharyas, whose servants we are? That much we can do even now. And yes, it's an austerity to deal with, especially in India, to work hard and try to cultivate Krishna consciousness at the same time, especially as family householders. It's not so easy thing to do. It is a great austerity, but when we have this higher purpose and when we have this goal in mind, and we're working on it as a matter of austerity, as a matter of necessity, then that work can actually purify us as well.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, there is one last question. I am very much inspired by seeing the life of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Could you kindly narrate some of his qualities to understand how he became so dear to Srila Prabhupada?
I could go all night. One thing I think that stands out, if you read his book, especially Servant of the Servant, very famous book, recently reprinted. One of the valuable things about that book that is understated, in fact, it's not stated at all, it's only implicit, and even then only to those who can see it. One of the most salient characteristics of that book is that Tamal Krishna Goswami not only shared with us the personal instructions in the form of his letters that he got from Srila Prabhupada, but he also interpreted each of those letters correctly. He understood what was the significance of those letters. He immediately understood the instructions that Prabhupada had given. He had an intelligence that was so piercing and at the same time so profound and spiritual as well, that somehow or other out of, it's like we say, Manushyanam Sahasreshu, out of so many thousands of people who came, he really got it. In the sense that he understood what is the last word of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Very literally, the last verse of that Shruti mantra is, Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau tasyaite katitha hirtaha prakashante mahatmanaha. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in the spiritual master, all the import of the Vedic injunctions is automatically revealed. He embodied that shloka. He really understood that shloka. Not academically, it was just his nature somehow or other. I think that this life in which he came in touch with Srila Prabhupada, it was certainly not his first dance, so to speak. He must be an eternal associate of Srila Prabhupada. To be able to understand so quickly what was the essence of what Srila Prabhupada was giving. That essence being to take shelter, to bathe oneself in the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee in the way that he did. And not an easy thing to really get that so clearly. And even after understanding it, then to apply it as well. That was the singular greatness of his character. As I said, he really, really embodied that principle, that ideal, because it is such an essential, intrinsic, the most quintessential dimension of Krishna consciousness, to understand how to surrender to the spiritual master, why to surrender to the spiritual master, what does it mean to be a disciple? That is what he embodied. Because of that, Srila Prabhupada loved him so much and took him close and trained him so carefully. And I'll go further to say that Bhakti Charu Swami had similar qualifications, which is exactly why Srila Prabhupada took him so close immediately. He told Tamal Krishna Goswami, I think Tamal Krishna Maharaj actually asked Srila Prabhupada that, this Bhakti Charu is a new man, why you've given him so much, encouragement and service and responsibility, attention, training. And Prabhupada said, I can see his adhikar. You may not see, I can see. So that was to both of their credit. That is the single most characteristic that stands out in my mind of Tamal Krishna Goswami, but he had so many other qualifications as well that are so valuable for Krishna consciousness. When he left this world, I felt as if 3/4 of ISKCON had been taken out, because his contributions were so vast and so many and so profound that it created that conception in my mind. I knew what he had been through and what he had done. The things that the very character of ISKCON as it is today, it was shaped through his efforts. And only someone who really knew him closely, I think, could actually see how that actually transpired. Anyway, he had these wonderful characteristics. Sheer determination was another one. No one could counter Tamal Krishna Goswami. And he always got what he wanted, one way or the other. So many examples I could give about this. I don't know how much time we have left or how much time you want to listen.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, you can continue.
So, for example, one time I remember they were preaching in one of the university campuses in the Radha Damodar party. And the campus authorities came out and said that, you people cannot do this. This is a public place. You cannot proselytize to the students of our university. And Tamal Krishna Goswami said, well, what is the problem? What are we supposed to do? He said, the university people said, you can preach to your own members. So Tamal Krishna Goswami, anyone else would have gotten discouraged and gone away and found another spot. But Tamal Krishna Goswami used his transcendental brain. He sent a brahmachari across the street to buy a notepad and pen. He came back and he numbered each line from 1 to 100. And at the very top, he wrote, I am a member of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and I'm taking part in this program voluntarily, and I'm not being coerced through the proselytization of these devotees. And he had every guest come up and sign the guest book, and then he would sit down and start talking to them. And so in this way, he would think of things like this. Another example comes to mind that when he first went to Paris, the devotees were not going out on Sankirtana because they had tried before and they had been arrested. And he knew that Srila Prabhupada was not going to accept this. And so he didn't accept it either. So somehow or other, he got that started. He started preaching to them that they should have faith in the orders of their spiritual master and they should be fearless. Just like Srila Prabhupada was fearless. In the late 1970s, mid-1970s, there were so many lawsuits against ISKCON from parents who felt that their kids had been kidnapped and brainwashed. And this actually made it into court only because the people of America at that time were thoroughly ignorant of what Krishna consciousness was. But Srila Prabhupada, when he saw this challenge, he only became enlivened. Even the devotees themselves were afraid of what's going to happen. This one case even made it to the Supreme Court of the United States. But Srila Prabhupada was not daunted in the least. He became increasingly enlivened the more opposition there was. And Tamal Krishna Goswami was like this also. Prabhupada told us, you just take all of my books into the courtroom, enter them as an exhibit, and speak only from those books. So this again shows how everything is in Prabhupada's books, but it also shows that Tamal Krishna Maharaj had this fearless and, what is the word? Unstoppable determination to spread Krishna consciousness. Whatever Srila Prabhupada wanted, he knew that if everybody else failed, he could always go to Tamal Krishna Goswami and it would be done, because that was a fact. What kind of devotee it has such character that anything the spiritual master asks him, it's done. Somehow or other, he did it. This was one of his great qualifications, and it extends directly from his natural and staunch faith that I described in the beginning. His great faith in Guru Nishtha, we call it. One final example. In the late 80s, I think, there was a court case in Mumbai because, believe it or not, one of Prabhupada's relatives wanted to claim as his inheritance all the physical assets of ISKCON. So Tamal Krishna Goswami was naturally the person who would be inducted to deal with that problem. Nobody else could deal with it. And he enlisted the help of so many others. One of them was Narayan Maharaj of Gaudiya Math. And so every day they were going to the courtroom in downtown Mumbai. And every day Narayan Maharaj would notice that Tamal Krishna Maharaj would go and very ardently pray in front of Sitaram in the Juhu temple. So he saw this again and again. He didn't say anything, but his mind was, he was wondering, what is this all about? Finally, he couldn't stand it. After some time, he approached Tamal Krishna Maharaj and he told him that, in our line, Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, generally we're worshiping Yugala Sarkar, Sri Radha Krishna, exclusively in Madhurya Rasa, according to the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Siddhanta. But every day I see that you're praying to Sitaram. Maybe just explain to me, I'm curious, tell me what are you feeling? Tamal Krishna Goswami turned around and he looked at Narayan Maharaj straight in the eye, and he told him, I'm not praying to Sita Ram. I'm praying to the weapons of Ram. When Narayan Maharaj heard this, he was stunned, as if he had just been shot by one of those weapons. He said he never before could imagine that anyone could have that kind of Guru Nishtha. That is actually a large part of why Narayan Maharaj became attracted to ISKCON and began preaching to ISKCON people, because he saw some of them have this adhikar. That was something that was Tamal Krishna Goswami preaching by his own example.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for giving your time and association. And
Okay.
we express our heartfelt gratitude for your grace for enlightening us and helping us to understand the mood of our spiritual master. You very nicely narrated your early days in Krishna consciousness, your deep relationship with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. You gave deep insight into the life of Maharaj and his instructions to you. As you told that as much we have appreciated the Vapu association, so we should do for the Vani also.
You have to, because there's nothing there anymore.
Follow it even in the absence of a spiritual master. And you talked about how the spiritual master leaving is Krishna's arrangement to bring us closer and become mature in our devotional services. You told that how this faith is a barometer for our surrender. And you very nicely answered the question about Varnashram, that how Varnashram is the only portal for general populace for pure devotional service.
For us as well. Srila Prabhupada in the beginning days, it's amazing if you read and study and hear some of his early speaking and lectures. He was hoping to really instill in us very, very high level of actually even Raganuga Bhakti. But after some time, he saw that his own disciples, even his leaders in many cases, they were not able to follow the basic things, because the modern society is so injurious and so aggravating and so antithetical that it militates against any development of Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada saw that the key to resolving that problem is to change the society. That's a very important realization. I think that's why Srila Prabhupada really started to emphasize Varnashram, not only Varnashram, but Vidhi-based Krishna consciousness, Vaidhi Bhakti in general, in the later years, because he saw that his own people were not able to keep their vows, that sannyasis were leaving, and so many things. So it's important for us as well. We have to imbibe the purification that Varnashram affects.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And at last, you told about how we can become dear to spiritual master through the example of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, having implicit faith on the spiritual master. So we beg for your blessings to empower us so that we can follow all these teachings and can become a loyal servant of Srila Prabhupada and serve the mission of ISKCON whole life. And we also request you to kindly visit Ujjain sometime. And,
Param Vijaya Sarvebhyaha. One thing that I always appreciated about Bhakti Charu Swami, every time I saw that he was giving an initiation, he would make his disciples promise that you will never leave ISKCON. He was very, very staunch in this way, Prabhupada man. Not so many people really deserve that title, but he's definitely one of them. So I'm hoping that I've said something at least that can inspire your rededication and to ease the pain of the loss of the Vapu, spiritual master's Vapu. I'm at your service. If anyone needs anything, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Yes, Prabhuji, we look forward for more of your association, and we thanks for this wonderful session. So we, all of us, can chant one time Hare Krishna Maha Mantra for thanking Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. His Grace Mukunda Prabhu ji ki jai. Jagat
Srila
Guru Srila
Prabhupada ki
Prabhupada.
jai. Bhakti
God,
Charu Swami ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
God
Gaur
Prabhu.
Premanand.
Hare Krishna.